It has been a struggle for me to determine whether to post a video over the last short while. As you see in the background, my reflections on to be or not to be, the archetypal symbol of our relationship with being and not being, the skull. The skull, very interesting. It was used by many artists. Rembrandt's painting of Aristotle contemplating a skull, many people have used the skull as a symbol to identify their concern, their profound interest in what it means to exist, to be here, right now. It's been difficult to figure out. I've done a video, I've deleted it. It was kind of getting too long. I tend to get maybe a little bit long sometimes, although I can't really judge what that means to be too long. I think this painting I'm working on is making me reflect and think of, in some form or other, being in a crossroad for myself. I find myself at a crossroad. I think it's exciting and it's also somewhat debilitating, because whenever we find ourselves in a period of change, there's both a kind of invigorating feeling, and as well there is a thing drawing us back and saying, oh, don't do that, don't do that. So it's been a little bit difficult to figure out whether or not I want to post, because I make my YouTubes, my videos are a little bit like I am when I work on a painting, because I don't really know where it's going to go, because there's no point in doing anything if you already know the outcome, because this is part of the structure, generally speaking, we adhere to, we associate with. Even people that are high-minded in their philosophical thinking and all, there's always the sense of an outcome. Even if you say, I love this phrase from the Song of Songs, translated Kabbalistically, that says, my peace is uncertainty. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, especially if you are creative in any form. If you're a person, an original thinker, whatever that might mean, an original thinker. There is a lot of value in approaching something from this point of view, that your basic satisfaction is in being dissatisfied or uncertain even. So I've been deliberating whether or not to post, because one of the things about making anything, making a painting, making something. I mean, we have hands, we have fingers, we do stuff, and it distinguishes us in the rest of the animal kingdom, because we appear to have this ability to grab something. It's representative to me too. We have the ability to grab something with our mind. We don't know what other creatures actually are experiencing, or what kind of process they go through in their existence. Some creatures live longer, some very short. Fruit flies live a matter of days. Some creatures even live a matter of hours. I wonder what happens within that span of time. And our perception of what it is that we are involved in obviously is extremely vulnerable. It's something that, as I work on a painting, it proceeds towards a direction. And this is something, if you can see in the background, I'm attempting to highlight this sense of change in a perception of a thing that is quite familiar to us. We're very familiar with the idea of our structure as physical beings. There is a kind of support system under us. I call us bags of blood. We are containers for the fluid, the liquid that is within us. 90% of us or more is liquid, is a kind of fluidity. So in a sense, our mind, our thoughts are suspended in fluid. That's what I was thinking today. We are, in the best sense of the word, we are fluid in our thoughts. We are bags of blood, we have a structure, we have what are understood to be bones and skulls. Where am I going with this? Okay. Something that is really disturbing me, something that is really beginning to have more of an influence than I thought, is the idea that within this experience that I have, there seems to be, and I don't think this is, you can't dispute this, there seems to be patterns. In fact, all of reality expresses itself, what we perceive, in patterns. If you look at the structures, is understood to be matter, if you look into, or what is perceived or what is recognized to be the structure, the building block of ourselves, there are patterns within the way things are set up, even to some extent very symmetrical. The idea of symmetry, I've always liked some aspect of symmetry, not in the mandala sense, but more in a feeling of an organic symmetry. If you think in terms of the cauliflower, how it reproduces itself, or if you're looking at a conch, a shell, that spiral idea, which is related to certain philosophies that I believe developed in the Renaissance, the idea of the golden rule, that there are certain proportions that appear to be underlying the structures of our existence. So, but I'm not so much interested in the technical side of things. I've never been really that drawn toward a practice based on technique, which is interesting in terms of how I perceive art history and the things that inspire me in the past, where people have produced produced objects of inspiration and real value to me as I see them. If anything, I enjoy them. I love looking at a painting that was done with a inherent, it has some power to communicate something that actually makes a difference in my own sense of being alive. It's like I look at, let's say, a Rembrandt, and I see the darks as something more than just dark. I see them as layers of something that I had not perceived or understood before. I find the color in Rembrandt, even though it appears brown and dark. I was just at the Frick Museum and saw the Rembrandts that they have, and the rider, the Polish rider. It's, oh, what a fabulous painting that is. And I think that what is communicated to me in those paintings is a way of presenting something, not so much what it is, the subject, although it's quite seductive. The idea of having a story, a guy sitting on a horse riding, it's fabulous. But what is more important to me is the underlying essence, the skull in the presentation. What is the structure underneath it? What comes through in the image that I see that is more profound than the story or the image that is like being told to me? I'm really struggling with this feeling of finding a connection to what it is that is significant to me as it applies to my day-to-day life. Obviously, it's not something that is esoterically removed from me, like the gamut of civilization and culture and the high thinking from Spinoza to Kant to Nietzsche to Aristotle to Plato. All these people have really very little significance unless they make a difference in your day-to-day life. And honestly, I have never really been that deeply changed in my life because I read something by Plato or anyone else. That doesn't mean you can't, but it just makes no sense. That's the way I'm made. So the idea, even in my own history of making painting, has always been a peculiar, denial of structure. a peculiar questioning of structure, and I couldn't be a good musician because of, well, from the point of view of any kind of a tradition, because I didn't have a feeling for patience. I'm a very patient person, but in order to accumulate traditions of working that would allow me to do something that actually is sound and reproducible. Let's say, for example, that in my life drawing classes, I mean, I would sit for days and days with the model, but it left me, I criticized myself for this a long time, but it left me feeling quite empty after having reproduced an image that was considered to be an eye-hand coordination technical feat, which I accomplished to some extent. It always left me rather feeling that this was not something I wanted to spend time on. So, and you can see as let's say if I was playing an instrument, there is a certain requirement of a technical knowledge, whether it's self-taught or whether you, well, I should distinguish here, because there are musicians that don't know notes that play phenomenal music by ear, quite a number of them. I can't list any of them off, but I've come across musicians that say they have basically learned their craft, their art, through listening rather than through studying counterpoint, harmony, whatever you study as a musician. So I align myself among people who are somewhat late bloomers, in the sense that I didn't acquire or I didn't pursue a technique that would fix me in a way of making the things that I want to make. This is important. The reason I'm talking about this is because I think there are people that struggle with the notion of their own value, and as we depart from a practice that is understood to be wholesome and valuable within, I'm talking within the creative sphere of things, as for example, if you are studying in some environment, a school, and you want to be a painter, quite often there is a focus on being able to reproduce reality, which comes out of history. I mean, to tell a story, you need, traditionally speaking, to be able to represent, even in the crudest form, some kind of image that is able to transmit the story you're attempting to tell. So in a contemporary sense, this has been, in a good sense and in a bad sense, it has been eclipsed. It has been eclipsed in the bad senses, that it has become a kind of free-for-all, because there is an incredible amount of self-discipline that is required to actually abandon traditional methods and means. And most people that I've come across, most students that I've come across, do not exhibit this enlightenment of discipline to teach themselves in a certain way. So the idea of art schools these days is predicated on everyone is an artist to begin with, and you just find your path within this universal existence of brilliance. And obviously we see that there are thousands of graduates from art schools in every city, everywhere in every country, and most of them will never really pursue any of the things that they had aspired to be, because it's a rather unforgiving profession. I don't see it as a profession, but let me just call it a profession, where people who do not have a discipline, whether it's imposed from outside Or the rare part of it from within is people fall by the wayside. So yes, you can acquire certain skills by doing something over and over that has been accepted to be of value, but really lack any kind of interest, for me anyway, because you're just regurgitating the same shit that was done before. And I say shit, okay, I say it not from the point of view that there isn't value in the history that we've come from, especially if you're attached to the idea of culture and civilization, which I want to clarify here, because I've said that the whole Notre Dame burning incident, now I'm talking about this from the level of culture and civilization, not from the point of view of some kind of a planned program that is playing in the background, whether we see it or we don't see it, because I think it's tied in to a ritual of abuse that is the underlying structure behind culture and civilization. I think Notre Dame, this incident, is related to that. But I'm thinking of Notre Dame as an expression of some, what people might consider to be their highest self. So you look at this edifice, this structure, whether it's a building or whether it's some other form, a painting or music, and we have an attachment. If it has some relevance and meaning to me, I attach myself to it and I emulate. I try to recreate in my own life some aspect of that. Not necessarily to build another Notre Dame, but to carry that spirit forward in some way. And I believe that to be extremely valuable. But what I don't see as value is to attach ourselves to something that really has no meaning in our life. We have to identify this. Each one of us has to identify the meaning behind something that we perceive that exists out there. Otherwise, we're just like regurgitating stuff that doesn't matter. Maybe it's just like keeping track of stuff. I mean, Notre Dame could be just thought of as keeping track of something. It's not creating in myself anything of value other than recording something that has occurred. And the magnificence, the structure, the building, the incredible amount of work that artisans put into this, and the designers, the concept behind it. It really is extraordinary. It's incredible. But in the sense of my own life, the experience that the way I'm talking about, the way I work, it has very little to do with my day-to-day life. I have to say this. And the way my own art making, my own way of working is primarily right from the very beginning, when I was 19, 20, and starting to be really interested in making art, there was this sense of not like, you sweat over a thing you're challenged to do, like a drawing from the model or a still life or something, and recreating the chiaroscuro, the light and shade, and the nuance of what it is that you're seeing. It's very important, but it never had a great deal of value for me, because I believe I realized back then that the path that I'm on, I have been on for 50 years almost, had more to do with a way of finding something that, as much as it is part of history, also is essentially who I am within the scheme of things. And it's not to propagate myself as being special or anything. It's like each person has their place in this mystery in some form or other. I was listening to a fellow talking about Spinoza and the Mahabharata and Arjuna and Krishna, and Spinoza saying, well, existence basically just is, and you got to accept it. You're a rotter or you're a swami, whichever way you just are. Well, this is where I depart, because it's sophistry. There is no sophistry in our day-to-day existence. It is actually real. It's not a matter of imposing any kind of philosophical idea on top of something that has a lot of meaning and significance. Like if I make a painting, it's not It's not something that is philosophical or aesthetic. It's actually hardcore, an engagement to the extent that if I build or do something that's a physical engagement, well, a painting is a physical engagement, but the real level of engagement is on a mental, spiritual, psychic level. This is what's going on. And this is the most real aspect to us being us. Not the fact we have a structure, a skull, and we're a bag of blood. No, it's what is somehow contained within that bag of blood, what we understand to be consciousness, and much greater for me, the idea of conscience, which the entire lot, for the most part, missed. Emerson got it. Emerson, in one of his essays, talks about conscience. And people talk morally. Yes, there are moral convictions that people have that relate to this idea of conscience. But conscience is not a moral structure. Conscience is something that is so pristine and elegant and beautiful within our consciousness that it separates what I understand. It separates when I am functioning on all cylinders. It's this feeling of me being within a state of conscience that lets me be on the right side of things, not only in terms of rules and regulations that we formulate through a moral compass, but something that puts me on the right side of things. This is very, very mysterious to me. I don't understand this, where this comes from, but I know we all have this ability to understand we're on the right side of things. Whether it's like when you hit yourself with a hammer, you're banging in a nail and you hit your thumb, you are not on the right side of things. Your conscience is not functioning properly. You see, it's not just in relation to other people in our relationship. It's something within ourselves that we do something and we are damaged, we're hurt, is because this principle isn't really functioning. And I mean, I don't want to dance on a pin of how minute this could be, but I'm just giving an example of how far-reaching this idea of conscience is for me. It's not just the rightness in terms of our decisions to be a moral person. Yes, that's involved, but it's to be part of the rightness of things. And this is something missed. I find the little bit of reading I've done on different philosophers, this is something I've always missed. Or when I listen to people, it's again that structure out there that pretends to give me something of value has always let me down. I'm entertained by it. I can read Dostoevsky, Notes from the Underground, or I can read whoever it is that I want to attach my entertainment value to, but it really has very little value in terms of not invoking this primordial sense within our human existence. This is crucial, our human existence, It's not like just, it's not an amorphous connection I feel I have to the world that I'm in. Now, I'm going to finish it off here. I hope this makes sense to people, because my entire mental process since the explosion of 3 nuclear reactors at Fukushima has been so fundamentally turned inside out. It is the source of everything that I'm understanding and saying. It was predicated on this event having occurred, much more so than Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island or even the Hanford site or the nuclear explosions, the tests that went on. It just sort of passed me by. But something rattled deep within me on this event, because I realized it represented physically, number one, but also psychically, that we are extremely vulnerable without this component of conscience. Or it's not that it doesn't exist, but it's something that I have to invoke within myself in order to benefit from, what is that? What philosophers go on about. It's like, what is this benefit? I'm not going esoteric here in terms of, the kingdom of heaven, what I consider to be eternity. In order for me to benefit within this realm of the mystery in regard to eternity, this is very crucial. This is our link. Conscience is our link to this sense of eternity, that I say I have a romance with eternity. It's because I've now recognized this is functioning in me on a much more direct level in a day-to-day sense. And it's reflected in my paintings as well. This is a wonderful thing in terms of being a painter. There is a record of this thing happening. I see it in other painters as well, that they create a record through their work that show you what it is that they have accomplished in themselves. It's not some comment about the world out there, it's a comment about their inner world, which is everything, because the inner world is directly related to what the outer world will be. I'm convinced of this. This is nothing new. Many swamis have talked about that, but they fail to identify this. You can enlighten me. If you have someone that is out there that has actually identified this aspect to us that is understood to be conscious, to be everything, and literally everything. What you can pile on top of that is pure entertainment. But if you don't work out of that source of understanding, everything is just fluff and entertainment, basically, for me, which is why I talk about truthers. The truther syndrome is such a seductive thing, to believe oneself to be on a much higher level of functioning if you tell anybody a truth, like a fact that is true. It's a moving target. It changes all the time. The only thing is we can be on the right side or the wrong side of things. And it's not always as clear cut. It's not black and white. It's a challenge. It's a challenge on many things. Yes, I acknowledge that. So I'm going to end it off here from what I want to say. This is a very sort of down to earth, rather than like brooding thing that I do quite often with my videos. I pick a topic, and like culture and civilization, you know how I feel about the entire edifices out there that supposedly represent the highest part of ourselves. It's been hijacked. We have been reduced to a shell. We're just a skull within this phenomenon called culture or civilization. We are not practicing. We are just regurgitating shit that was told to us. And now it's more and more, some of it was really good, but now it's more and more becoming so obscure to the ordinary human being in terms of being able to interpret, identify something of value to us. It's all been placed in front of us in these museums that have valuable artifacts, but we can't interpret them anymore because we've lost our connection to conscience, to be on the right side of things. So whatever you throw in front of it, pearls before swine. That's how it works. So my position, I'm not going to be a defender and safeguard the traditions of brilliance. I need to be the brilliance through my inner work that I want to see out there. And if I see it in others, I will alert you to it, or I will recognize it. I will admire it, whatever it is, my response would be. But the idea that we are caught, okay, my final point. I'm beginning to see much more that the habituation of this, what I call it as function, which is represented in civilization and culture, which fundamentally ends up being a crowd control system. We are being crowd controlled. It is another way of manipulating and getting us to do certain things. This is a very complex reality that we exist in that is now being clearly identified to be so habitually repeating itself, whether you want to go over thousands of years or even just days. This is a habitual reenactment of something that is not ourselves. Like I said, because we are not on the right side of things. We're being able to be diverted from the right side of things in our day-to-day lives every day. So we're living someone else's life. That is culture and civilization, as I say. And if you need to attach yourself to the great edifices of the past, well, good luck to you. It's not going to work. That's what I say. It's not going to work. And my conclusion on this, is that I am, and this seems maybe possibly where people say, well, he's losing his mind. I would actually go, I'm much more on the side now of the idea that since there is no such thing as coincidence or just, oh, it just happened because for no reason. Our reality is so complex. There is no room for me to entertain the idea something could just happen by chance. Because I don't understand something I don't understand the complexity of something doesn't mean it can be simplified or understood. It just cannot be understood by me. So what this means to me is that the manipulation, and I'm leaning toward manipulation from the point of view that the reality we experience appears to me to be quite dysfunctional. So there is something that lacks what I understand to be conscience, that is not active in this experience that we have called reality, which leads me, this is a conclusion I'm now more and more coming towards, that there is in fact, the complexity is organized with, for lack of a better word, I'll call it an artificial intelligence, meaning that it's a computational ability, nanoseconds of 1,000,000 computations in a nanosecond, like that chess computer that beat Kasparov or whoever it was, because it was able to determine in an infinite number of choices enough to beat the guy, to beat the intuitive player. I mean, he had enormous expertise from a chess point of view, but a computer could literally beat this, and I think consistently will beat the human being now, this artificial intelligence, this representation of something in reality that is habitually being recreated through an intelligence that is not of our understanding. I'm not going into the esoteric God side of things. I think that because of the manipulative side of things, I believe this to be of a mechanistic nature in the largest sense of that word, mechanism. Like you could have like even a sense of intuition in a mechanistic world. So my point today, what it was, okay, I'll end it off here. I'm actually convinced that we are in some form in a simulation, because once more, we have abandoned conscience to be on the right side of things. So we are within this structure, we're able to be coerced, seduced, whichever way you want to put it. But fundamentally, unless we begin to invoke this independence to be ourselves on the most fundamental level, we're going down a very nasty road. I'm going to think a little more about this as I work through my skulls. I'm going to think a little more about this, because this is why we have Fukushima. This is why we have the vaccinations, the incredible manipulation by the mucky fucks, the white coats, who think themselves to be superior, but they're just part of this, kind of like the Mahabharata, the relationship that Arjuna has to Krishna. Like Krishna saying, you're just a little peon in the scheme of things, just follow through, just go through all the shit you have to go through, whether it's mayhem and murder and all that stuff. Well, you got to go through. No, it doesn't work that way. The Mahabharata may represent what is in fact occurring, but this is where it happens. Choice begins with conscience. This is very important, people. This is almost like a TNT monologue again, the Nous Tertulia. I will continue on this. 33 minutes. Oh, what a perfect time to stop. 33 minutes.